Our guest is Nicholas W. Stuller, the founder and CEO of MyPerfectFinancialAdvisor, a matchmaking site for investors and advisors. Nick is also the author of The Truth Shall Set Your Wallet Free, Secrets to Finding the Perfect Financial Advisor, published by Post Hill Press. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, David. Great to be here.
Excellent. So let's dive right in. What are the top myths that investors have about advisors?
Well, it's a great question. There are a lot of myths, unfortunately, but some of the big ones are, number one, you have to be rich to have an advisor. Not only is that not true, that's actually never been true, but it's less false today than it ever has been. So that's a big one. You have to be rich. Another one is you have to have a portfolio to have an advisor. That also hasn't been true for a very long time and is not true today. Another myth is that there's an awful lot of investors that are self-directed or semi-self-directed that think advisors add no value. And that's been kind of proven, not kind of, it's been proven not to be the case. And then, of course, there's the myth born out of some scandals in the 70s and 80s that every advisor is out to make $1 million at your expense. So there's an awful lot of them. So those are kind of the big four.
Why would you say that these myths are so harmful to the investor?
Well, all you have to do is look back a couple of years to the headlines when the government shut down and all these government workers were going bankrupt. They didn't have more than $400 in the bank. The reality is, and that's just a proxy for the broader problem. The broader problem is the average American household harms themselves financially because they have no advice. So by buying into these myths that are propagated by admittedly great movies like The Wolf of Wall Street, great cinema, bad message, in totality, they don't get the advice that they need because, I mean, many of these myths may have had truth to them decades ago, but aren't true at all today. And so they literally are harming themselves by not seeking advice. Almost like if you doubted the value of a medical doctor and never went to a medical doctor your entire life, sooner or later, you're going to regret that, buying into that myth.
Well, that was really going to be my next question is how do these myths get started and how are they continue to be perpetuated? Because as you very well know, Nick, the financial services industry, including specifically investment advice or financial planning, has evolved substantially over the last 30, 40, 50 years.
Yep. Well, they evolved. Well, first of all, personal financial advice relative to other professions is relatively new. It's less than 100 years old. Law, medicine, even accounting, insurance are many hundreds of years old in some cases. So people don't know what they don't know. So when you don't know about something, you tend to discount it. And so that's kind of the beginning of it. Then in the 70s and 80s, there were bad practices, which made it even more difficult for people to understand they could get good financial advice. And then some of the marketing by some of the largest firms in the country made it clear they only want millionaires, overshadowing the message of advisors, of which there are hundreds of thousands in every city in every state in this country who are giving advice. They don't have the budgets to advertise, didn't need to advertise, never knew they existed, but all you heard was this message on TV that, come to us if you have a portfolio of, pick your number.
Yeah.
So, there are a number of reasons, and it's also complicated to understand personal finance. And to an awful lot of people, it's boring. They just, no one loves to talk about life insurance and eagerly calculate when they're going to die so they can pass it on. A lot of these topics are not fun and enjoyable like other pastimes. So you put all those things into a bucket. That's how these myths have taken root, and then you add in some nice cinema to talk about, the 1% of the horror stories. That's how these things keep going.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize it. And you hit an interesting point that is not often discussed, and I think this is probably an enormous blind side for the financial industry, is that we are so excited and we think this stuff is just fascinating, and building a financial plan is just, it's better than an ice cream sundae. But to everyday people, they're going, what's wrong with this guy, right? I mean, this stuff, and that does lend to, I think, your point about perpetuating the myths and why, it's such a a boring topic and it's just kind of off the beaten path for most people who just don't focus on it that much.
And it's not taught in schools. And there's been a lot of movement afoot to get this to be mandatory educational content. And it should be, in my opinion, from kindergarten to your last year of college, a personal finance class, to get you to understand it, at every level of learning. And that's part of the problem too, is there's no uniform body, the government, that is really encouraging or mandating education on what is a very important topic.
Yeah, and what's interesting, and I agree totally with your point, Nick, about the education. What's also very interesting is because it's boring and because it's something that, in fact, some people get a great deal of anxiety even talking about it or looking at their finances, that they delay and they put it off, of course, to their detriment, as you very well know. And this is why, of course, it is so critical to get past these myths and to embrace and interview and evaluate working with an advisor who can meet the person's particular situation and their needs.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree completely.
Well, there's still a lot of education for us to do, but with a lot of people advocating and more, people, like you said, looking at the educational aspects, but just getting people to, slow down and take a look at this. And, I know a lot of companies are working on making this more interesting, and of course there's a lot of effort to make it simpler for people. Not that they aren't intelligent, but because it's not something you do every day, it needs to be put in plain English.
Absolutely. I mean, when you start, and there are still some advisors out there that roll out the industry jargon, alpha, beta, gamma, and for 99% of Americans, it's not, as you say, in good old-fashioned plain English, and it's complicated, and it really needs to be educated in a common sense, real world manner to make it relatable. And many of these topics, as you well know, are highly complicated, especially when you get into complicated insurance strategies to protect risk, or high net worth investing when you want uncorrelated assets. There's so much. I mean, it's extremely complicated, which makes it very, very difficult. And it's highly emotional. I mean, people losing money or winning money, that triggers emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which fogs the mind sometimes, and often in the wrong way.
Yeah, you're spot on, Nick. Very good stuff. All right, Nick Stuller, MyPerfectAdvisor. Thank you for your contribution. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.